Hi, everyone. I am Donna Reed, and this is Donna Reed Talks Voice. And we're going to have a discussion with Martin and Diego, my last two lessons that you saw on my channel. And what's really interesting about these last two lessons is that they are totally different genres, totally different approaches. And we're going to have a discussion as to what happened. Diego listened to Martin's lessons, Martin listened to Diego's lesson, and we're going to see where we're at with that.
Great. Hi everyone, I'm Nellie, as you well know if you've been watching the channel. I am Donna's editor and producer, and I'm going to actually start off the discussion today. I've been also watching both lessons, and Diego, you said something in your lesson that I envy you greatly because you said, I just dared to stay there when you hit a part of your note that you weren't familiar with, that it was not a normal thing for a normal sound that you are used to making. And I know for me that's a big struggle. Donna can attest that anytime I get there, I'm like, ah! and I stop. I'm one of the people that stops, and I'm now going to channel my inner Diego during lessons and say, dare to stay there. But Donna, for you, you know, what is it that makes us do that? It's obviously psychological, and but there's a part of the mechanism that's brand new when you're doing stuff like that to us. I always say Donna's really tricky. She gets you to do things that you've never even known that you could do before. And I know Martin, you just were like, oh, this is a very new perspective for me. So Donna, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what happens to us when that happens, and then if either of you gentlemen have something to say about that experience, I'd love to hear that.
Sure. It's the basic human condition. It's the unfamiliar. So if it's unfamiliar, we're going to back away from it. I don't know what that is. Especially as we get older as human beings, we get settled in what we think we know and what works for us. And, as singers, especially if you've been singing a long time and it works relatively well, and I know what I'm doing, and I have to do 8 shows a week, and I have to know what I'm doing, I have to make it work. Then when somebody says, well, you know what, forget about what you just did. Let's try to do something differently. What? You mean different? Yeah, I don't know. So it's just the unfamiliar. And then, in fact, I will tell you what it is. I'm going to quote Cornelius, as I do a lot. He always said, you have to have the courage to be bad before you can be good. And we all, especially anybody who's working professionally, it's not even the courage to be bad. It's that we can't afford to be bad because we're not going to get the role. We're not going to get the part. We're not going to get the gig. We're not going to, if something goes weird and wonky. And the way most people teach is they teach aesthetically. They teach, we want the aesthetics. We want to hear the aesthetics right now in this lesson, right here, right now. I teach functionally. I just want to hear what the function is. What's functionally happening? Functionally, it may go, but then that may lead to something really good. Now, I'm the only teacher in the world who would let their students go, without freaking out and saying, oh, no, 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 we can't do that. We have to fix it. We have to, make it work. We have to. So it's the unfamiliar, and it's the idea that in the technical part of the lesson, you have to listen functionally. You have to approach it functionally, not aesthetically.
I have a follow-up question for that, but Martin and Diego, do you have any observations or other mentions of that?
Well, in my experience, I've always defined myself as an actor who sings and dances, and I think that helps me a lot when going into weird places, when you're not approaching it from the beauty of the singing, but just from whatever, from I sing to feel things and to make people feel things and to not to sound pretty. So then I don't care. I've been lucky enough to train with people who didn't care if it sounded weird or wonky or whatever, in order, like Donna, which is a pleasure to work with because you just let go and try and find different sounds. So when we detach ourselves from singing has to be beautiful, it just has to be voice out there and has to express feelings, then you let go and then you trust the person that's across from the screen in this, uh, like today. But yeah, you just have to dare to explore and find what your instrument is able to do in any way.
If I can just interject a second, because that's great. I'm going to give an example. Obviously, if somebody has a beautiful voice, we love the beauty of the voice. That's wonderful. But I always bring up Louis Armstrong. Now, that's a damaged voice. I could listen to him all day long. He's an amazing artist. He gives you feeling, he gives you soul, he gives you, he didn't worry about aesthetics. He couldn't worry about aesthetics. That was his voice. So I could listen to him and then appreciate Pavarotti, who had maybe the best technique of all singers ever. Do you know? I mean, amazing. So you've got two extremes, one totally gorgeous sound, one not a gorgeous sound, but two great artists. So you can do that.
You know who also doesn't? This is hilarious because her voice is aesthetically amazing, but who never worries about the aesthetics is Audra McDonald. Doesn't care about the aesthetics
Yeah.
either.
Yes.
She's like in if you listen to Marie Christine, you hear that a lot. I mean, she can do no wrong in my eyes, but she's not worried about like when she's doing the ending of Marie Christine and it's like just wailing and wild and crazy. She's like, oh, I wasn't thinking about that. Or even in Your Daddy's Son, right? She's not
Right.
thinking about the
Correct.
aesthetics of the sound in that. We all want to hear it, but that's interesting. Martin, how about you?
I come from a different perspective, but I experience a similar dynamic because I know vocal functions because of my studies and because I'm studying vocal pedagogy. So I tend to reproduce structures or my thoughts on vocal function. So I think that's the function I want to achieve. So I do not let new experiences happening. For example, chest voice, I tend to, okay, I search for chest voice. And so it has a little bit of pressure because knowing the function or whatsoever doesn't align with the real function at all times. So I'm coming from the pedagogy point of view for the same process.
Yep.
Yeah. So Donna, as my follow-up question for you from a few minutes ago is, as a teacher, how I don't really know my question. My question is, when you're teaching, because as you said, it's very difficult for a lot of teachers to separate the aesthetics from the functionality. How do you know when something is not necessarily aesthetically pleasing? How do you tell if it's functionally correct?
Usually I hear it
Okay.
because my ear is trained to hear are those muscles coordinating well or not? I can hear the constriction, I can hear the grab. Not always. My ear's not perfect, of course. If I don't hear it, or if I'm not sure about what it is I just heard and is it functionally better, I will go to another part of the voice and test it out. So, for example, especially if I'm working on the middle part of one example, females, if I'm getting a mixed belt in the middle part of their voice, then what I do is it sounds great to me. They say it feels great. I'm going to test the extreme high notes and see, well, did we lose those? And I'm going to test the extreme low notes. Did we lose those? So if it sounds aesthetically good and I think it's functionally good in the middle, but then we lost the low notes, well, then I know something's not right. There's something that didn't go off. So I always have as Cornelius used to say, he would say this in Germany and the Germans would laugh. I have my checkpoint Charlies. So he used to say that the place would just guffaw. It's like, oh, okay, we know what generation he's from. So, because you check it out if you're not exactly sure.
Mhm. And if something does drop out, the high notes or the low notes drop out, do you go? I know sometimes it's yes and sometimes it's no, but when do you decide to go back and finesse in the lesson itself, or to leave it alone, to let it?
Depends on where in the lesson it is. Now, if it's at the end of the lesson, I might just say, that didn't quite work, but it's the end of the lesson. I'm not going to make the muscles do any more right now. If it's maybe in the middle of the lesson, I would probably go back and try to fix that mix.
Nice. Nice. My next question for you, I'm going to move along, is you're talking about both in both lessons we discussed backing off, right? And the mistaken, you said the mistaken notion that you need more chest voice than you do. Um, and in Martin's lesson, you were talking about how you actually this is a separate question. I'm going to leave it there. With the notion, like, how do you determine like how much to back off without backing off too much, and and that and that.
So for each person, it's different. I hear it in the sound and I say that one. Okay, that sound is definitely freer, better. You can hear it objectively, although when we're singing, when we're the ones singing, it's very difficult to hear it objectively. So, but the objective part is, what is the ah doing? What's the vibrato doing? How do you feel the pressure? Is there pressure in the throat? Is there no pressure in the throat? Usually we can feel it feels a little bit freer, but one of the things that you really need to listen to, especially in the low voice, especially where we need to back off, is what is the vibrato doing? So if the vibrato is steady and even and it doesn't have a wobble or it doesn't go dead straight, well, then we know something's right about it. So we get a feel, we listen to the quality of the vowel, we listen to uh, the vibrato, and then we figure out ourselves, each individual, how much energy are we giving that. I have students who will sing a high note and without giving that excess energy. It's just the right amount. It sounds amazing. I hear it free. They feel it free. And then they look at me and they say, I'm giving maybe 20%. And I said, well, that's a fortissimo. So your fortissimo is now 20%. Somebody else may feel it differently, but one has to figure out by the quality of the sound, by the freedom of the sound, how much do I give for that note on that vowel at that volume?
Yeah. Diego, when you're in 8 shows a week, how do you navigate that and balancing your own voice and navigating, because you said you were up there in those high registers the whole show or a lot of the show. Go ahead. I'd love to hear about that.
Well, it truly depends on the show you're doing, and the what it is expected of you in that show. Right now in Kinky Boots, I'm very lucky because I'm a swing, which means that I have to be very flexible and ready to go at any given time. But it also means that I'm not performing every day. So I just take care of myself and rest and work on the specifics of the show. Like if I would take lessons with Donna every week, I would probably hit on those on how to make it an easier life for me in singing those notes. How to make them. Also, I've learned throughout time, throughout my working life that it changes when you are an ensemble member and when you're a lead. So I found out today that it's very, very helpful to know that your sound is full or is perceived as full at your 20%. Because if I'm in an ensemble of 10 people and I'm singing my 20% and it gives a full sound, then why do more? Because I have to live and do more shows the rest of my life. Yeah. But it truly depends on the show you're doing. I remember when I was doing Les Mis, I would just go to the theater, go home, nurse, non-life, like eat, sleep, go to the theater. And then, I don't know, I was doing Follies and I was playing Young Ben, which has two numbers in the show, and it was like easy on my voice and I could sing it just as I woke up, then I could relax a little bit more because it felt easier. So you have to be smart about it. You always train, you rest, and then you try to be very like in Donna's lesson. I have to thank you because not many teachers in the world have your approach. I've encountered, I mean, and they treat voice like you treat your muscles or your body when you're dancing. Try to understand how it works and your thyroid, and that it's a muscle that actually tilts or does this. And those images, to me, are actually more helpful because I can understand them, because I can see them. I can go to a doctor and put a camera through it and see what it actually really physically does. More than imagine something softer, something rounder. What is rounder for me is not round for you. Um, Sorry, I'm going on and on and on,
No, go ahead, go ahead.
but yeah, that's what I do. I try to make everything as objective. I try to think of everything as objectively as I can and dissect it, both in my voice lessons and in my daily work.
You brought up a very good point in when you talked about ensemble singing, and this is similar if you're in a Broadway show, if you're in a professional chorus, if you're singing opera at the Met in the chorus, if you're singing oratorio, whatever. Whenever we're in a group, we always want to be loud. We hear the group around us. We want to be loud. We want to be loud. We want to be loud. You're in the ensemble. You just need to fill in the sound. You don't need to do the out and out belt. You don't need to be the loudest soprano. You don't need to be any of that. Your sound will fill in the sound in the ensemble. You just need to do, as you said, it's different for each person, 20%, 30%, whatever that percentage is. And but it's difficult when you've got all that sound around you. And especially if something, oh, I'll give you another example. If you're in a rock group, you cannot hear yourself. You cannot hear yourself. That's, and I've taught people who sing in rock groups, right? You have to sing the way you sing and let the sound guy do his thing because you will not hear yourself. So if you try to sing louder to hear yourself with all of that noise around, you're dead. You're dead. You won't make it through one show.
That's it. That's it. That's why I was saying it's so helpful to get those tools about how you feel and your own perception, muscular perception of what you're doing. Because if you're dancing and singing and other 20 people are singing around you, you're not gonna hear yourself, but you know what your muscles are doing. So if you know what they're doing, then you know you can balance that a little bit better.
And also pedagogically, um, the Martin, you were talking about the involuntary. Well, actually, you were talking about the muscles and getting your chest voice. And Donna, I wanted to bring you in to talk about the involuntary nature of the muscles and how you set up the right circumstances to create the muscular. Wait, I'm going to say that
Coordination.
properly so that I can.
Coordination, yeah.
Yeah. And you set up there's the involuntary nature of the muscles, and you're setting up the coordination, the circumstances to create the right coordination.
Yes, exactly. Because the vocal cords themselves and the intrinsic muscles, all of the inner muscles that stretch the vocal cords, make them thicker, bring them together, all of those muscles, they are all completely involuntary, no nerve endings in there. The muscles that we feel are the extrinsic muscles, and what ideally we shouldn't feel any of those muscles. So, what we need to do is approach it in an indirect manner. I love to give this analogy. It's like the heart. The heart is an involuntary muscle, it just beats on its own. But if we want to affect the heart, run up and down the stairs, you'll make your heart go faster. Sit and meditate, you'll make your heart go slower. So you can change the external environment to get those muscles, the vocal cords and the intrinsic muscles, to work in a particular way. But then what's tricky about that for each individual singer is you don't feel the specific muscles, but like Diego said, you kind of know what your muscles are doing. So you get a sense of, well, what am I doing? How am I approaching it? What is my um, uh, physicality of it? What am I kinesthetically feeling to make that freedom happen? So, and everybody feels that differently. Sometimes you feel absolutely nothing. Sometimes you feel a particular type of engagement. Sometimes I can't even describe the million things that you might feel as a singer. But whatever you feel, we just don't want the negative constrictive tensions. We don't want that support, because if you think that you need to do that support to make it work, then that won't last long. But each singer has to figure out, well, what is my body doing? What is the musculature that's making the inner muscular involuntary muscles do what they need to do?
So Martin, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you on that, since you were talking about how you actually take your pedagogy knowledge and manipulate your voice to do what you want it to do.
I'd say it's most of the parts, or the most of the times, it's hit or miss, maybe. So if I want to coordinate my own instrument, it's really hard to do on the subtle parts. Mainly, I can do falsetto, I can do chest voice, I can uh, lower my larynx a little bit, I can stretch everything around here and so on. I can do some breathing exercises. So they are all in my repertoire, but they are not really precise. When I want to coordinate my own instrument, I have to go to a teacher because I can't really do it myself, really on my own. I have some tools which go that far, but the last so percent are really hard to do myself. So uh, yeah, that's really the involuntary part of it, and the reflectory coordination that I can't get on point myself.
Yeah, that's a very good point that you bring up because that's absolutely true. It is extremely difficult to fix your own voice because you're not objective. Because many times what you're feeling and hearing on the inside is not actually what's going on. It doesn't, what we're hearing on the outside is not really what you're feeling and hearing on the inside. Cornelius fixed his own voice after a teacher absolutely destroyed his voice. The man was miraculous. The man was an anomaly. He was just a genius. I don't know how he even fixed his own voice. And up until the day he died, his voice sounded amazing. I mean, he didn't have an old man voice. Nellie can tell you that she knew him. He had a young speaking voice. His singing voice was beautiful, steady vibrato. He just fixed his own voice. I don't know how he did that. But for the overwhelming majority of the rest of us, we need that outside ear. We need that objective personality saying, the little this, little that, little the other thing. And then, of course, the question is finding the right person for you. Many times, with a lot of teachers out there, you're better off working on your own. But if you're fortunate enough to find that person with the objective ear who can help you along, then you go with them, and then you just be sensible about that. When I go to this teacher, is it better? Or if I go to this teacher, does it feel worse? I mean, I know people who've gone to, famous teachers and they say they leave their lessons and their throat hurts. I'm like, that's a big red flag, that shouldn't happen. But anyway, yes, it's very, very difficult to do it on your own.
Well, I'll take it back. This is my last piece, and it's a perfect segue. Um, you know, Diego, you were talking about how allowing yourself to know that it's the sound you're making is a legitimate sound, right? And to have somebody on the outside say, yeah, 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 that's the one. And because I know for me it sounds crazy sometimes. And I'm just like, either it's not satisfying at all, which is my biggest complaint because I'm only doing 20% or whatever. And I want to feel like I'm doing something, but it doesn't, but like you said, if I can only do 20%, why not just skate on by with my 20%? Or I want to feel, just, or I can't hear what's happening. And so because it's inside of your own head, it sounds completely different than outside. So if you get a recording of it and you hear it after the fact, you're like, oh yeah, that was pretty good. I thought that one was terrible, but I guess it wasn't. And I know that some of your students, Donna, will be like, that sounds like Ethel Merman, and I don't want to sound like Ethel Merman. And it's like, it doesn't. It sounds really gorgeous and very beautiful. Then let it sound like that if that's what you think it sounds like, right? So if anybody has anything that they'd like to add or anything like that.
Well, I think we have to accept and embrace who we are in any stages of our lives. And if you sound like Ethel Merman, maybe you should embrace it. And instead of fighting it, because it's how you sound. and it's beautiful. And we have all these ideas, previous ideas of what we should be, or how we should sound. I don't know. I feel like I should have lived in the 60s or 50s because my voice sounds better there. And now what's been written for musical theater now, it's like super high belty, and it's not who I am. Well, you'll find your way. You'll find your way, and it will come. The show that you want to do, or the band that you want to sing in, or you'll find your way, but just embrace it.
Yeah. I also want to, another Cornelius story. He said that he had a teacher come to listen in on some of his lessons as he was teaching. And at the end of the day, the teacher looked at him and said, "But all of your students sound different." Yeah, yeah, they do. They should. Because and I remember this very specifically when I went to college. um you sounded like you came from this Professor so and so studio. You sounded like you came from Professor Essa's studio of blah blah blah. Because they make everybody sound the same. If you listen to a lot of the pop singers, not the big ones, but it's like,
Yeah.
can you tell one from another? Eh.
Just recently, I was listening to just the radio, and I turned to the person I was with, and I was like, "Is this all the same person? Are they just playing the
Don't you
same person over and over?" And it wasn't, but it's all the same auto tune filters, and they all just sound exactly the same, and you can't even tell them apart.
Yeah.
don't you find it terrible when you're listening to something on the radio or Spotify or whatever, and you're like, is this person or this person? Well, if you don't know, then there's something.
That's valid.
One of the biggest lessons I learned while in New York was that you have, like, when acting, and I think it's useful for singing, after having a certain technique and a certain knowledge of your instrument and what you're doing, what actually makes us different is that what my images, my opinions about what I'm doing are mine and mine alone, and that those will make me unique. So my voice, my take on how I sing, and my management of my instrument, as long as it's healthy and it's solid, it's my own, and it'll be no one else's. And that'll make a difference when you sing, when you audition, when you go do something.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's the danger of recordings in general, so that you have an expectation in any given circumstance. So, and that is true for pop music and classical music in general. I had to think of an early Dietrich Fischer Disco recording where he used to use falsetto. And
Mm.
Diego, you talked about that's not a legitimate sound because it's maybe too false, and they don't had that expectation back then. They just thought, maybe that's a quite beautiful sound. It's easy. I go for it.
Yeah, that's a very good example because back then when he was singing, they used more, the men used more of that falsetto-like sound. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. Nobody objected to that. But today in classical singing, you are absolutely correct. They won't use that anymore. It's like there's something wrong with the falsetto. You can't use the falsetto. It's like, why? It's beautiful.
And
A good
it's
point.
true.
And you're correct about the recordings.
Yeah, we should be able to go listen to all those singers that we hear on the recordings live, because we would find many imperfections. We would find, and even if they're the greatest, we would find, things that are not, because the recording, you can, even if it's live, you can go through filters, whatever, you can twitch it in many ways, and it will never be like a live performance. And also, what voices should sound like changes with time. And
Absolutely.
and that's why Ethel Merman is too loud today. Well, I don't know, or whatever. And belty girls are what belting to like super high notes is something that they never did in the 70s or 80s. And
Yeah.
now it's what is expected of a woman doing musical theater. And what if your voice is not there? Well, you'll find your way.
It's similar to athletics though, right? Because they're, now in ice skating, if you don't do a triple, if you don't do a quadruple, then why are you even here? But, even 15 years ago, a double was like, ooh, they're doing a double sow cow. And so, is it evolutionary or is it just, you get one person can do this freakish thing and so now everyone has to figure it out?
I think in my opinion it has to come to a point where with economics, with economy and I don't know, rental prices, or it has to come to a point where it will stop. And some people, and I think we're getting there. There are some classical shows like in I talk musical theater because it's my playground, but um, there's more classical shows happening. There's more shows with not all those like super high expectations of voices, but going more towards the storytelling and not so it'll come to a point where it'll explode and we will it has it like in my opinion.
Pendulum.
Yep.
Hmm. Exactly. Do either of you gentlemen have anything that you wanted to ask Donna about from your lesson or each other's lessons?
Can I ask you for a private lesson anytime soon?
Sure. Absolutely.
No, I just wanted to thank you because it's been a great time and very enlightening, and it's great that you do this. I'm truly grateful.
And I'm going to bring up the fact that with technology, we can make these recordings, one, put them on YouTube, two, and three, Diego's in Spain. We can have a private lesson because we can do it virtually. So I embrace the virtuality of it. I embrace the fact that I can teach people all over the world and that, this can spread all over and we're not just confined. So bringing up that part of it. So a lot of people will say, oh, technology, whatever. And yeah, there's pluses and minuses to everything, but I'm embracing it right now. So,
And I just want to say that Donna embraced it prior to the pandemic. We had just started getting her set up to do virtual lessons. I think you had one or two students virtual
yeah,
pre 2020 or just
yeah,
right before, like maybe right at the start of 2020 you had gone for it. And
exactly.
so it was great for you because in this time where everyone else had to figure out how to do it, how to get the equipment, you were already set up and you were just like, oh, I guess we're just flipping to virtual. That's fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Thanks to
so
Nellie, who's just the most brilliant, amazing person. I don't even have enough words to say how amazing Nellie Beavers is.
Martin, any last bits?
Mm, no, not really.
Okay.
I'm just
Okay.
thankful for the opportunity. So
Amazing. Well, thank you, gentlemen,
Thank you very much.
for joining us. What wonderful lessons and what a great discussion. All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
both. Thank you, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for watching Donna Reed Talks Voice. If you have any questions for me about this episode, or if you'd like to join me on a future episode, please visit donnareedtv.com and click Contact.